Assalamualaikum and hi. This is our video for MAT263 with the chosen topic balancing chemical reaction. Before we get into the actual case study, let me explain to you briefly what is linear algebra. So basically, linear algebra is one of the main branches of mathematics which studies the systems of linear equations, linear transformations, vectors and vector spaces. It also involves letters and other symbols which are used to represent numbers and quantities in formula and equations, which you will see later on in the video. It also states mathematical problems by using letters or other symbols to form equations. Now, let me explain what is chemical equation. Chemical reaction equations are basically mathematical and symbolic models of real-world components. Therefore, it is governed by specific rules and principles. Law of the conservation of matter is one of them, which this law states that the total mass of the products must equal the total mass of the reactants. As for example, consider the chemical equations H2 plus O2 will become H2O. This is an example of a chemical equation which is a concise way of representing a chemical reaction. Please note that the initial substances are called reactant, which in this case are the hydrogen atoms and the oxygen atom. And the final substances, which is the water molecules H2O, are called products. Based on the chemical equation mentioned before, the equation is not balanced. This is because even though there are two hydrogen atoms in the reactant and product, there are two oxygen atoms in the reactant, but only one oxygen atom in the product. So, to balance it out, you can just simply add a coefficient in front of the atom in the product side and the reactant side. So for example, from H2 plus O2 become H2O, we add the coefficient 2 in front of the hydrogen atom and the water molecule. So it will become 2H2 plus O2 will become 2H2O. So we can see that there are now 4 hydrogen atoms in the reactant and the product side, and there are 2 oxygen atoms in the reactant and product. So in a way, this also satisfies the law of conservation of matter. Now let's move on to the problem statement. In this situation where Amir have assigned to do a chemistry experiment that is given by the teacher, he uses ethane gas C2H6 to react with molecular oxygen in gaseous form, and they combust to form carbon dioxide gas CO2 and steam. The steam condenses to form liquid water. Below shows the chemical equation for the combustion reaction in Amir's experiment. The chemical equation is C2H6 plus O2 will become CO2 plus H2O. So now Amir have to balance the equation. Now let us look at the mathematical analysis that is done on the equation given. The equation is not balanced. This chemical reaction consists of 3 elements: carbon C, hydrogen H, and oxygen O. So our task is to assign the unknown coefficients PQRS, OX1, X2, X3, X4 to each chemical species to balance the above equation. To solve the problem, we use the Gaussian elimination method. which is also reduced row echelon form in solving the linear equation. This method is quite long, especially if the process of reducing the system to row echelon form involves many steps or operations. Therefore, matrices can be used to represent a system of linear equations. A matrix is said to be in row echelon form if it is number 1, any zero row is placed at the bottom of the matrix. Number 2, for each non-zero row, the first non-zero entry is 1. And number 3, for two consecutive non-zero rows, the leading one in the top is further to the left than the leading in the second row. You can look at the example given. Next, the operations that can be done is number 1, interchanging between the row. Number 2, multiplying a row with a non-zero constant. And number 3, multiplying a first row with non-zero constant and add to the second row. The row that changes is the second row. Now, let us look at the formulation of the equation. As mentioned before, we have to assign an unknown to each species or components of the equation. So in the first step, we have chosen the unknowns to be P, Q, R, S. And in the second step, we have to compare the number of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen atoms of the reactants with the number of atoms of the products. We will obtain the following set of equations. In the third step, we will make a homogeneous form based on the equation and use Gaussian elimination to solve it. And in step 4, we make use of null space where Ax is equals to B to get the final answer. And now we will look at the solution of the problem. So first, line 3 simultaneous linear equations in 4 unknown corresponding to each of these elements like shown. And please note that there are 4 unknowns but only 3 equations. The system is solved by Gaussian elimination method as follows. Adding negative R1 to R2 to make it 0 under the leading one for the first row. And then we will interchange R2 and R3 to get leading one for the second row. And next, we will multiply R2 with 3. And we will add 2R3 to R2 to make it 0 on top of the leading one in the third row. Next, we will add R1 with R3. And then, we will divide every row to get 1 as the leading one to make it easier in the end. And then we will get the final form. There are 3 pivot variables, P, Q, R, and 1 free variable S. Let S equals to 6, so that P equals to 2, Q equals to 7, and R equals to 4. We remark that this is not the only solution since there is a free variable S. The null space solution is infinitely many. Therefore, the final answer is 2C2H6 plus 7O2 will become 4CO2 plus 6H2O. Hence, the chemical equation is said to be balanced because the number of atoms of the product side and the reactant side is the same. As the conclusion to this case study, every chemical reaction can be represented by the systems of linear equations. Balancing chemical reaction is not chemistry, but it is just linear algebra. This study investigates that every chemical reaction is represented by homogeneous systems of linear equations only. This allows average and even low achieving students a real chance at success. It can remove what is often a source of frustration and failure, and that turns students away from chemistry. Also, it allows high achieving students to become very fast and very accurate, even with relatively difficult equations. Hence, it is clear that this case study helps to increase knowledge in the application of linear algebra in real life situation.